February 23rd, 1945, 8:47. Hours, Iwo Jima. Sergeant Frank Mitchell, 24 years old, pressed his face into volcanic ash so hot it burned his cheek. 30 yards ahead, the concrete pillbox was invisible, except for its firing slit, a thin black line that had already killed 7 men from Easy Company that morning. The M1 Garand in his hands felt useless. He'd put 20 rounds into that slit over the past hour. Might as well have been throwing pebbles at a battleship. The Japanese Type 22 machine gun inside started up again. Mitchell watched bullets kick up black sand in a line that walked toward Private Danny Reeves, pinned behind a blown-out landing craft. Reeves was 19, from Oklahoma. Talked about his girlfriend's letters every night. Then Lieutenant Garrett dropped beside Mitchell with something that looked wrong. An M1 Garand, but the barrel was twice as thick, heavy. The wooden stock had been cut down and fitted with a strange bipod. Garrett's hands were shaking as he loaded in what appeared to be a single, massive bullet into the breech. "Course says this'll crack that pillbox," Garrett said. His voice was tight. "Never fired one before." Mitchell looked at the weapon, then at Reeves, then at the pillbox that had turned this beach into a killing field. He didn't know he was looking at the M1 rifle grenade launcher, a weapon so devastating the Japanese would call it the Toride Koroshi, fortress killer. By February 1945, the United States Marine Corps had a problem that was killing thousands of men. The Japanese had perfected the art of fortification warfare across the Pacific Islands. From Tarawa to Peleliu, from Saipan to Iwo Jima, American forces encountered defensive positions that rendered conventional infantry weapons nearly useless. The statistics told a brutal story. During the Battle of Tarawa in November 1943, U.S. forces suffered 3,407 casualties, taking an island just 2.5 miles long. At Peleliu in September 1944, the 1st Marine Division took 6,526 casualties, a 40% casualty rate, against fortifications that had been engineered with precision. The Japanese had studied every American assault from Guadalcanal forward. They knew the maximum effective range of every U.S. weapon. They knew how long it took for naval gunfire support to arrive. They knew the kill radius of American grenades, and they built their defenses accordingly. Japanese engineers had created a new generation of fortifications by 1944. These weren't simple bunkers. They were reinforced concrete structures with walls 18 inches to 3 feet thick. They were positioned in interlocking fields of fire. They had multiple firing ports. They were connected by tunnels that allowed defenders to retreat, regroup, and reoccupy positions that Marines thought they'd cleared. At Iwo Jima alone, the Japanese had constructed more than 11 miles of tunnels connecting 2,500 defensive positions. The standard American infantry arsenal struggled against these fortifications. The M1 Garand rifle fired a .30-06 Springfield round with excellent accuracy and stopping power against personnel, but concrete didn't care. The round would chip the surface, nothing more. The Browning automatic rifle added volume of fire, but not penetration. Hand grenades required getting within 40 yards of positions that could kill you at 400 yards. Bangalore torpedoes worked, but required soldiers to crawl within arm's reach of enemy guns. The Marines had flamethrowers, but flame operators had a life expectancy measured in minutes. On islands where Japanese snipers had been given specific orders, kill the flamethrower first. At Iwo Jima, the average survival time for a flamethrower operator in combat was 270 seconds, 4.5 minutes. Tank support helped when terrain allowed it. But many Pacific islands featured volcanic rock, dense jungle, or beaches too soft for armor. Even when tanks could operate, coordinating infantry armor operations while under fire was complex and slow. Men died while waiting for tank support. The Corps needed something portable, something a single Marine could carry and fire without support, something that could crack concrete, silence machine gun nests, and collapse fortified positions. They needed it immediately, and they needed it in sufficient quantities to equip every rifle company hitting the beach. The problem was urgent because the next targets were larger and more heavily fortified than anything American forces had encountered. Intelligence estimates from late 1944 indicated that Iwo Jima had defensive positions that made Peleliu look primitive. And beyond Iwo Jima lay Okinawa, and beyond Okinawa lay the Japanese home islands, where American planners estimated casualties could reach 1 million men if conventional invasion became necessary. Traditional procurement couldn't solve this problem. Designing, testing, and manufacturing an entirely new weapons system took years. The Springfield Armory and Ordnance Department had protocols, testing requirements, and approval processes that made sense for peacetime, but seemed criminal when men were dying for lack of proper tools. So the Marine Corps and Army Ordnance did something unusual. They adapted existing technology in ways the original designers never intended. They took the M1 Garand, already in production by the millions, and modified it to fire projectiles it was never meant to handle. They took existing grenade designs and created launching systems that could be fitted to standard rifles in under 30 seconds. By January 1945, the first production models were reaching the Pacific. They came in wooden crates, marked with standard ordnance codes that gave no indication of what was inside. Most Marines had never seen them. Most officers didn't know they existed. But on the black, volcanic beaches of Iwo Jima, they were about to change the mathematics of island warfare. The Japanese called them Toride Koroshi, fortress killer. They weren't wrong. If you want to see how the Marines turned the M1 Garand into a weapon that could destroy concrete pillboxes, hit that like button and subscribe. This story gets even more intense. Back to Sergeant Mitchell on Iwo Jima. The M1 rifle grenade launcher wasn't a single weapon. It was a weapons system that transformed the standard M1 Garand into a portable artillery piece. The official designation was the M7 grenade launcher with M9A1 at-rifle grenade, but Marines who used it had simpler names: the Bunker Buster, the Pillbox Popper, or simply the Heavy 7. The core component was the M7 launcher, a steel tube that fit over the muzzle of a standard M1 Garand. The launcher itself weighed 13 ounces and measured 8.5 inches long with an internal diameter of 0.95 inches. It attached to the barrel using a clamp and pin system that could be installed or removed in 22 seconds by a trained operator. The launcher's rear portion contained gas ports that vented propellant gases at precise angles to manage recoil and prevent barrel damage. But the revolutionary component was the projectile, the M9A1 anti-tank rifle grenade. This wasn't a traditional grenade. It was a shaped charge warhead, the same technology used in bazookas and anti-tank weapons, miniaturized for rifle deployment. The M9A1 measured 10.6 inches long and weighed 1.38 pounds. Its copper-lined conical cavity at the front concentrated explosive force into a superheated jet of metal that could penetrate armor or concrete. The physics were elegant. When the shaped charge detonated, it created a Monroe effect, a focused explosion that turned the copper liner into a plasma jet traveling at velocities exceeding 25,000 feet per second. This jet could punch through 4 inches of armor plate or up to 10 inches of reinforced concrete. For comparison, Japanese Type 22 pillboxes typically used concrete walls between 18 and 24 inches thick. But the M9A1 didn't need to penetrate completely. The shock, wave, and spalling effect inside the fortification killed or incapacitated everyone within. Firing the system required modified ammunition. The M1 Garand's standard 30-6 round generated insufficient pressure to launch the heavy grenade effectively. Ordnance developed the M3 grenade launching cartridge, a 30-06 case loaded with a special propellant that produced 50% more chamber pressure than standard ammunition. The cartridge had no bullet. Instead, a wooden plug sealed the case mouth and disintegrated upon firing. The procedure was specific. First, the operator ensured the M1's gas cylinder plug was set to the grenade launching position, which shut off the gas system and converted the weapon to straight pull bolt operation. This prevented the violent cycling action from damaging the launcher. Second, he loaded a single M3 launching cartridge into the chamber. Third, he slid the M9A1 grenade onto the launcher tube until it seated against the launch ring. The grenade's tail fins stabilized flight and armed the fuse after 3 meters of travel, a safety feature that prevented premature detonation. The complete system, M1 Garand, with attached launcher, loaded grenade, and ammunition, weighed 13.8 pounds. Maximum effective range was 120 yards against point targets, 150 yards against area targets. Minimum safe range was 40 yards. Closer than that, and the operator risked injury from their own weapon's blast effects. Muzzle velocity was 285 feet per second, slow compared to a rifle bullet's 2,800 feet per second, but sufficient for the weapon's role. Recoil was substantial. The M1 Garand typically generated 14 foot-pounds of recoil energy. With the M9A1 grenade, recoil jumped to 62 foot-pounds, more than a 12-gauge shotgun. Operators quickly learned to fire from prone position with the butt plate against their shoulder and their body weight behind the weapon. Standing shots were possible, but inadvisable unless the shooter wanted a bruised shoulder and reduced accuracy. The sight system used the M1's standard rear aperture sight, but operators aimed using the grenade's visible body as a front sight reference. The trajectory was highly arced. At 100 yards, the grenade rose 12 feet above the bore line before descending to target. This meant operators could engage targets behind cover or inside trenches, but it also meant they needed clear overhead space to fire. When Marines first saw the system demonstrated at Camp Pendleton in December 1944, the reaction was skepticism mixed with dark humor. Captain James Rodriguez of the 5th Marine Division watched an instructor place a M9A1 grenade through a concrete block at 75 yards. "It blew that block into gravel," Rodriguez later wrote. "But I was thinking about the poor bastard who'd have to carry this thing up a beach while Japs were shooting at him." The skepticism was understandable. The system was heavier than a standard rifle. It required special ammunition. It reduced the M1 to single-shot operation. It generated tremendous recoil, and it had never been tested in actual combat. But it could kill fortifications that nothing else in the infantry arsenal could touch. And in February 1945, that capability was worth every inconvenience. Sergeant Mitchell watched Lieutenant Garrett extend the bipod legs and settle the heavy launcher into the volcanic sand. The modified M1 looked wrong, top-heavy, ungainly, like someone had welded a pipe bomb to a rifle and called it improvement. The grenade itself was olive drab with yellow nose markings, shaped like a fat bullet, heavier than it looked. 40 yards, Mitchell said, reading the distance to the pillbox. Manual says minimum safe distance is 40 yards. We're at 30, Garrett replied. I can do math. The Japanese machine gun fired again. Private Reeves screamed, not hit, just terrified. The sound cut through the general chaos of the beach. Naval gunfire, small arms, artillery, men shouting, wounded men screaming. Mitchell had been fighting for 73 minutes. Felt like 73 hours. Garrett aligned the sight picture. The grenade's body served as the front sight. He was aiming high. The manual said the trajectory arced like a rainbow. Too low and he'd hit the sand. Too high and he'd sail over the target into the volcanic rock beyond. He'd fired exactly 3 practice rounds at Camp Pendleton. 3 rounds to learn a weapon he was now betting his life on. Firing, Garrett said. The M1 roared. Not the familiar crack of a .30-06 round. A deeper, heavier boom that Mitchell felt in his chest. The launcher vomited flame. The grenade wobbled off the tube, fins stabilizing after 3 yards of flight, then arced toward the pillbox in a lazy parabola that seemed to take forever. Mitchell counted seconds. 1, 2. Thar! The explosion wasn't loud so much as profound. A deep, crumping sound followed by the sharper crack of disintegrating concrete. The pillbox's firing slit, erupted with dust and debris. The machine gun stopped mid-burst. For 5 seconds, 5 beautiful, impossible seconds, the beach was quieter. Then the pillbox fired again. Jesus Christ, Garrett said. I hit it dead center. But Mitchell understood. Concrete's too thick. We spalled it, but we didn't crack through. The M9A1 was designed to penetrate 4 inches of armor, or 10 inches of concrete. Intelligence had estimated 18-inch walls. They'd underestimated. This pillbox had walls at least 24 inches thick, with rebar reinforcement and sand filling the gaps. The shaped charge had done its job, created a superhot plasma jet, punched into the concrete, created shock waves, but it hadn't been enough. Fire another, Mitchell said. Garrett's hands shook as he loaded a second M3 launching cartridge. His shoulder was already bruising from the recoil. The bipod had compressed into the sand, and he had to adjust position. The Japanese machine gun had shifted aim too, sweeping the area where the grenade launch had revealed American positions. 43 seconds to reload. Garrett slid the second M9A1 onto the launcher, aligned the sight, held his breath, fired. This time Mitchell watched the grenade's entire flight. Saw it rise in that strange floating arc. Saw it descend toward the exact same firing slit Garrett had hit before. Saw it impact. The explosion hit the weakened section where the first grenade had cratered the concrete. The second shaped charge found compromised material, concrete with cracks, with reduced structural integrity, with gaps the first blast had opened. The plasma jet punched through. What happened inside the pillbox, Mitchell could only imagine. The shaped charge's energy converted to heat and overpressure in a confined space. The copper liner became a jet of molten metal. The concrete spalled inward, sending fragments at lethal velocities. The 4 Japanese soldiers inside, 2 manning the Type 22 machine gun, 2 reloadings. Ammunition had nowhere to go. The machine gun went silent, stayed silent. "Reeves!" Mitchell shouted. "Move! Now!" Private Reeves scrambled from behind the landing craft, sprinting in a combat crouch toward the destroyed pillbox. Other Marines followed, first a few, then a dozen, then a wave of men who'd been pinned for over an hour finally able to advance. Mitchell and Garrett moved forward with them. When they reached the pillbox, Mitchell looked inside. He wished he hadn't. The interior was painted with what used to be people. The machine gun was intact, but the crew wasn't. The concrete walls showed a crater 18 inches deep where the second grenade had penetrated. The first hit had weakened it. The second had finished it. 2 shots, Garrett said quietly. He was looking at his shaking hands. 2 shots to kill a position that stopped a whole company. But there were dozens more pillboxes on Iwo Jima. Hundreds. An Easy Company had only 12 M7 launchers, with 180 M9A1 grenades total. The math wasn't encouraging. Still, word spread fast. By 11 just hours, every rifle company on Red Beach had heard about the weapon that could crack Japanese fortifications. Requests for the launchers flooded battalion headquarters. Supply officers found themselves suddenly popular, as Marines who'd never cared about ordnance paperwork now desperately wanted the heavy launchers and their shaped charge grenades. The Marine Corps had brought 4,200 M9A1 grenades to Iwo Jima. By the end of D-Day, they'd expended 847 of them. By D+3, they were requesting emergency resupply. By D+7, Springfield Armory was running 3 shifts to produce more. The weapon worked. It worked so well that the only problem was they didn't have enough of them. The M7 grenade launcher system spread across the Pacific Theater with remarkable speed. What started as a limited-issue experimental weapon in February 1945 became standard equipment in rifle companies by April. The 1st and 6th Marine Divisions received their first shipments in late February while preparing for the Okinawa invasion. The 77th Infantry Division, the 96th Infantry Division, and the Americal Division all drew launcher systems in March and April. Production numbers tell the story. Springfield Armory manufactured 3,140 M7 launchers in January 1945. In February, production jumped to 8,150 units. March saw 14,200 units produced. By April, Springfield was manufacturing 18,600 launchers per month, a 372% increase in just 4 months. The Army Ordnance Department designated the M7 as a critical war material in March 1945, giving it production priority equal to ammunition and medical supplies. Grenade production was even more intensive. The M9A1 at-rifle grenade required precision manufacturing. The copper liner had to be formed to exact tolerances, or the shaped charge wouldn't function properly. Despite these challenges, U.S. ordnance plants produced 286,000 M9A1 grenades between February and August 1945. Production reached 85,000 grenades per month in July. Distribution was chaotic but effective. Launchers and grenades traveled to the Pacific on Liberty ships, often packed alongside standard ammunition and rations. Supply officers at forward bases prioritized distribution to units in active combat. On Okinawa, the 6th Marine Division received 840 launchers and 12,600 grenades in the first week of April, just before the invasion began. The 1st Marine Division got 720 launchers with 10,800 grenades, but logistics created constant problems. The M3 launching cartridges were packed separately from the grenades for safety reasons. Launchers arrived in different shipments than the projectiles. Units received grenades but no launchers, or launchers without ammunition. At one point in April, the 7th Infantry Division had 340 M7 launchers, but only 480 M9A1 grenades, barely more than 1 grenade per launcher. Training was minimal. Most Marines and soldiers learned to use the system in combat or from quick demonstrations by battalion armories. A typical training session lasted 15 minutes. Here's how you attach the launcher. Here's the special ammunition. Aim high because the trajectory arcs. Fire from prone position. Don't stand too close to your own blast. Then you were sent forward with 3 grenades and good luck. The Japanese response to the M7 system evolved rapidly. Initially, they were confused. After-action reports from Iwo Jima described Japanese soldiers emerging from damaged bunkers with shocked expressions, unable to understand how American infantry had suddenly acquired such devastating firepower. They'd built their defenses to withstand standard infantry weapons. The shaped charge grenades bypassed those calculations. By late March 1945, Japanese defenders on Okinawa had begun adapting. Intelligence intercepts revealed that they'd issued specific orders. When you see the Americans with the heavy rifles, target them first. The distinctive profile of the M7 launcher made it easily recognizable at range. Marines carrying the launchers became priority targets for snipers and machine gunners. Japanese engineers also modified their fortifications. On Okinawa, American forces encountered pillboxes with double walls, 2 layers of concrete separated by 3 feet of packed earth. The M9A1 could penetrate the outer wall, but lacked the energy to punch through the inner wall. Other positions featured angled firing slits that made direct hits difficult. Some pillboxes had stone deflection walls, positioned 10 feet in front of firing ports, designed to detonate grenades prematurely. These adaptations reduced the M7's effectiveness, but didn't eliminate it. Marines learned to fire multiple grenades at the same point, using the first shot to crater the outer wall and subsequent shots to penetrate deeper. They coordinated attacks with one launcher targeting the firing slit, while another aimed at structural weak points, ventilation shafts, entrance, ways, corner joints. They used the launchers to pin defenders, while demolition teams moved forward with satchel charges. Statistics from Okinawa illustrate the system's impact. The 6th Marine Division reported that M7-equipped units reduced average time to neutralize fortified positions from 47 minutes to 12 minutes. Casualties suffered while assaulting pillboxes dropped by 64% in units with adequate launcher and grenade supplies. The 1st Marine Division estimated that M7 systems accounted for 38% of all destroyed Japanese fortifications, despite making up less than 5% of the division's total weapons. But the system had critics. Some officers argued that the launcher's weight and bulk made carriers vulnerable during movement. The limited ammunition supply meant many Marines carried a sophisticated weapon system they couldn't use once their grenades were expended. The substantial recoil caused shoulder injuries. The 5th Marine Division reported 127 cases of launcher shoulder bruising and muscle strain in April alone. More seriously, there were accidents. The M9A1's 40-yard minimum safe distance was frequently violated in close-quarters combat. On April 18, 1945, Private First Class Raymond Torres of the 27th Infantry Division fired an M9A1 at a pillbox from 25 yards. The blast wave from his own grenade threw him backward, fracturing his collarbone and causing severe concussion. He survived, but was medically evacuated. Other incidents were fatal. The shaped charge's design made it sensitive to mishandling. If the grenade impacted at the wrong angle, the fuse could fail to detonate, or worse, detonate unpredictably. On May 3rd, Corporal Michael Brennan was killed when an M9A1 he was loading onto the launcher detonated prematurely possibly due to a damaged fuse. The blast killed Brennan instantly and wounded 3 nearby Marines. Despite these issues, demand for the system never declined. Unit commanders who'd operated without M7 launchers and then received them consistently reported the same conclusion. This weapon saved lives. It allowed infantry to engage fortifications that previously required tank support, airstrikes, or suicidal assaults. In the brutal mathematics of Pacific Island warfare, the M7 system shifted the equation favorably. By June 1945, Army and Marine Corps units throughout the Pacific had integrated the M7 into standard tactical doctrine. Rifle companies were authorized 12 launchers with 180 grenades. Replacement grenades were included in regular ammunition resupply. The system had transitioned from experimental technology to essential equipment in just 4 months. The M7 grenade launcher system's effectiveness came from its exploitation of shaped charge physics, but that same physics imposed strict operational limitations that affected how Marines used the weapon in combat. The shaped charge principle dated to the 1880s, when munitions researchers discovered that explosive charges with hollow cavities produced focused jets of energy. By 1945, this technology had matured into the Monroe effect, named after Charles Monroe, who studied hollow charge explosives at the Naval Torpedo Station. The M9A1's conical copper liner was precision formed to create optimal jet formation. Upon detonation, the explosive force collapsed the cone inward at velocities exceeding 20,000 feet per second. The copper didn't melt. It plastically deformed under extreme pressure, becoming a coherent jet of metal particles that maintained stability for several feet of travel. This jet's temperature reached approximately 1,000 degrees Celsius, but its penetrating power came primarily from kinetic energy rather than heat. The jet impacted target material with pressures exceeding 5 million psi, enough to flow through steel or concrete like water through tissue paper. The penetration mechanism was hydrodynamic rather than thermal. The jet and target material both behaved as fluids under the extreme pressures involved, but the physics imposed requirements. The shaped charge had to detonate at precise standoff distance from the target, typically 2 to 2.5 times the cone diameter. Too close, and the jet didn't fully form. Too far, and the jet dispersed before impact. The M9A1's fuse was designed to detonate on impact, with the grenade's nose providing the correct standoff distance automatically. This worked perfectly against flat surfaces, but created problems against irregular targets. Marines quickly learned that the M9A1 struggled against certain fortification types. Pillboxes constructed with logs and earth, common in jungle environments, absorbed the shaped charge's energy without catastrophic failure. The jet penetrated but created only localized damage. Against these targets, the M9A1 was less effective than conventional high-explosive grenades, which relied on blast and fragmentation. The system also suffered from accuracy limitations. The M9A1's slow muzzle velocity and high trajectory arc made it susceptible to wind. A 10-meter crosswind at 100 yards could deflect the grenade by up to 3 feet. Marines learned to estimate wind effects, but this was guesswork under combat conditions. Staff Sergeant Albert Kowalski of the 1st Marine Division developed a rule of thumb. Aim 2 feet upwind for every 10 nm you feel on your face. It was imprecise, but better than nothing. Range estimation was another challenge. The M1 Garand's rear sight was graduated for rifle bullets, not slow-moving grenades. Operators had to learn holdover through experience. At 50 yards, aim at the target. At 75 yards, aim 2 feet high. At 100 yards, aim 4 feet high. At 120 yards, maximum effective range, aim 6 feet high and hope. Beyond 120 yards, the grenade's trajectory became so steep that accuracy was largely luck. The launcher itself required maintenance that standard M1 Garands didn't. The muzzle clamp had to be properly tightened, or the launcher could separate during firing, sending the grenade tumbling wildly. The gas cylinder plug had to be set correctly, or the M1's gas system would cycle during firing, potentially damaging the launcher or injuring the operator. Marines were supposed to carry a combination wrench tool for launcher installation and adjustment, but these tools were frequently lost or misplaced. Fouling was a constant issue. The M3 launching cartridge's wooden plug disintegrated upon firing, leaving wood particles and powder residue in the launcher tube. After 5 to 6 shots, accuracy degraded noticeably as fouling affected grenade seating. The manual specified that operators should clean the launcher after every 10 shots, but this was impossible in sustained combat. Some Marines carried cleaning rods. Most didn't bother and simply accepted reduced accuracy after extended use. The recoil created a different kind of maintenance problem. It destroyed rifle stocks. The M1 Garand's walnut stock was designed to withstand 14 foot-pounds of recoil. Repeated 62 foot-pound impacts, cracked stocks, loosened action screws, and compressed wood fibers around the receiver. After firing 40 to 50 grenades, the rifle often required armory-level repairs. Some units began reinforcing stocks with metal plates or switching launcher duty between multiple rifles to distribute wear. Ammunition logistics complicated everything. The M3 launching cartridge was incompatible with standard ammunition. If a Marine loaded an M3 cartridge with the gas cylinder plug in normal position, the excessive pressure could damage the operating rod. If he loaded a standard .30-06 round with the plug in grenade launching position, the insufficient pressure wouldn't launch the grenade properly. It would tumble off the launcher or fall short of target. This meant Marines had to carry 2 types of ammunition and remember which was which under stress. The M3 cartridges were marked with red lacquer around the case mouth, but this marking wore off with handling. In combat, tired men sometimes loaded the wrong ammunition. This usually resulted in mission kills, grenades that didn't launch, but occasionally caused weapon damage. The M9A1 grenade itself was remarkably durable. Tests showed the shaped charge could withstand drops from 20 feet onto concrete without damage. The copper liner was protected by the steel body. The fuse was mechanically simple and reliable. But the grenades were sensitive to one thing: moisture. Water infiltration into the explosive cavity degraded the composition, reducing the shaped charge's effectiveness. Marines learned to keep grenades wrapped in wax paper or stored in waterproof containers. Night operations revealed another limitation. The launcher's muzzle flash was enormous, a 6-foot fireball that destroyed the operator's night vision and pinpointed his position for enemy gunners. Marines firing the M7 at night had to relocate immediately after each shot or risk counterfire. Some units stopped using the launchers after dark, except in desperate situations. The Japanese learned to exploit these limitations. They began constructing pillboxes with sloped fronts designed to deflect grenades. The M9A1's nose-initiated fuse needed to hit at approximately 90 degrees to the target surface for optimal effect. Oblique impacts at 45 degrees or less often resulted in the grenade glancing off without detonating. American ordnance never solved this problem. Operators simply had to recognize sloped surfaces and adjust their aim or find different firing positions. Despite these limitations, the system worked because its strengths outweighed its weaknesses in Pacific combat conditions. Most Japanese fortifications were constructed with vertical concrete walls, ideal targets for shaped charges. Most engagements occurred at ranges under 100 yards, within the M7's effective envelope. And most importantly, the system gave every rifle squad the ability to engage fortified positions without waiting for support weapons. That capability alone justified every operational compromise. The M7 grenade launcher system fired its last combat rounds in August 1945. On August 14th, the day before Japan's surrender announcement, Marines on Okinawa used M9A1 grenades to clear remaining fortifications in the Kunishi Ridge area. Then, abruptly, the war ended. Springfield Armory ceased M7 production on August 16, 1945. The final production run, 3,840 launchers and 47,500 M9A1 grenades, sat in crates at various supply depots across the Pacific, suddenly obsolete. Total wartime production reached 68,450 launchers and 286,000 grenades. These numbers represented an enormous industrial effort compressed into 7 months. Post-war, the Army classified the M7 system as limited standard in November 1945. Military terminology meaning the weapon was being phased out but remained serviceable. The stated reason was that improved anti-tank weapons, particularly the M20 Super Bazooka, could perform the M7's role with greater effectiveness and range. This was technically true, but ignored the M7's primary advantage. It required no specialized training, used the standard M1 Garand as its launch platform, and weighed considerably less than a bazooka. The real reason for the M7's retirement was more complex. The Army was planning the M14 rifle to replace the M1 Garand. The M14's different operating system and barrel specifications made it incompatible with the M7 launcher. Rather than develop a new launcher for the M14, ordnance planners decided to focus on dedicated grenade launchers like the M79, which entered development in 1952 and service in 1961. Most M7 launchers were surplused in 1946 and 1947. Some were sold to Allied nations. Greece received 4,200 launchers in 1947 for use in their Civil War. The Philippines got 1,800. Most American launchers were simply destroyed. The M9A1 grenades were more problematic. Shaped charges don't age well, and storage of 200,000 plus explosive devices was expensive. The Army detonated approximately 180,000 M9A1 grenades at various ordnance disposal sites between 1946 and 1950. But the technology didn't disappear. The shaped charge principle, refined in the M9A1, influenced post-war anti-tank weapon development. The copper liner design and standoff distance calculations informed heat, high explosive anti-tank, warheads used in everything from tank rounds to missile systems. Modern rifle grenades, used by militaries worldwide, employ variations of the M9A1's attachment and launching concepts. The M7 system was partially declassified in 1947, fully declassified in 1958. Even then, few historians paid attention. The weapon had existed for less than a year in combat. It wasn't as dramatic as flamethrowers or as infamous as the atomic bomb. It didn't feature in war movies or memoirs. The soldiers who used it were scattered across America, getting on with their lives, rarely talking about the war. Modern rifle grenade launchers operate on similar principles to the M7, but with improved technology. The M2 grenade launcher, introduced in 1969 and still in service, can fire 40-mm-shaped charge grenades effective against light armor and fortifications. Contemporary systems like the M320 use computerized fire control and programmable ammunition, but the basic concept remains. Give infantry portable firepower to engage hardened targets. The influence extends beyond weapons. The M7 system represented a broader shift in military thinking, the recognition that modern infantry needed organic capabilities to handle diverse threats without waiting for support. This philosophy informed the development of combined arms squads, where each fire team possesses weapons for multiple scenarios. Today's infantry squads carry rifles, machine guns, grenade launchers, and anti-tank weapons as standard equipment, a direct evolution of lessons learned in the Pacific. Interestingly, the Japanese designation, Toride Koroshi, fortress killer, proved more enduring than any American nickname. Post-war Japanese military histories consistently reference the weapon using this term. To Japanese veterans and military historians, the shaped charge rifle grenade represented the moment when their defensive strategy became obsolete, when concrete and rebar no longer guaranteed protection. In terms of direct lineage, the closest modern descendant is probably the rifle-launched heat grenade systems used by various militaries today. These weapons, like the French APAV-40 or the Russian VOG-25, employ shaped charges or thermobaric warheads designed to defeat fortifications. They fire from dedicated launchers rather than modified rifles, but the tactical role remains identical: infantry portable firepower against hardened positions. The M7's historical significance lies not in technological innovation. Shaped charges existed before it, but in rapid adaptation under pressure. The Army Ordnance Department took existing components, combined them in new ways, tested them minimally, and pushed them to combat units in less than 6 months. By peacetime standards, this was reckless. By wartime standards, this was exactly what was needed. Men were dying because they lacked tools to fight fortifications. The M7 gave them those tools. Sergeant Frank Mitchell survived Iwo Jima. He fired 23 M9A1 grenades during the 36-day battle, destroying 7 confirmed pillboxes and assisting in the destruction of 4 more. He was wounded twice, shrapnel wounds, on March 14th and March 23rd, but both times refused evacuation. He received the Bronze Star with Combat 5 for actions on February 28th, when he used the M7 launcher to destroy 2 interconnected pillboxes that had pinned down a platoon from Fox Company. Mitchell returned to the United States in September 1945. He was 25 years old. He never spoke publicly about the M7 launcher until 1987, when a military historian tracked him down while researching Pacific weapon systems. Mitchell's comments were characteristically understated. It was heavy, kicked like a mule, but it worked. That's all that mattered. Lieutenant William Garrett, the officer who fired those first 2 grenades on Red Beach, survived Iwo Jima, but was killed on Okinawa on May 11, 1945. He was leading a platoon assault on a fortified ridge when Japanese machine gun fire killed him. He was 26 years old. His family donated his personal effects to the National Museum of the Marine Corps in 2003. Among those effects was a small notebook containing sketches and notes about the M7 system, including trajectory calculations and firing tips he'd developed for his men. Private Danny Reeves, the young Marine Mitchell had watched pinned behind the landing craft, made it off Iwo Jima. He was wounded twice, but survived. He returned to Oklahoma, married his girlfriend, and worked as a teacher for 37 years. He died in 2008 at age 82. His obituary mentioned he was a Marine veteran, but said nothing about Iwo Jima or the fortifications that almost killed him. The Marine Corps Gazette published a detailed after-action report on the M7 system in November 1945. The report included testimonials from dozens of Marines who'd used the weapon. One comment from an unnamed sergeant in the 4th Marine Division summed up the general sentiment. Every time I fired that launcher, I thought about the guys we'd lost taking pillboxes before we had it. If we'd had these things at Tarawa, half the men we buried there would be alive. The weapon's secrecy meant that families of Marines killed before February 1945 never knew that a system existed which might have saved their sons, brothers, or fathers. This wasn't anyone's fault. Weapons development and deployment timelines don't align with human grief, but the tragedy remains. The M7 launcher arrived 7 months too late for the Marines who died at Peleliu, 2 years too late for Tarawa, 3 years too late for Guadalcanal. Today, a single M7 grenade launcher is on display at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia. The placard explains the system's basic function and provides minimal historical context. Most visitors walk past without stopping. The weapon looks ungainly and strange. A thick tube clamped to a rifle, a heavy grenade with tail fins, and an oddly shaped nose. Nothing about it suggests the lives it saved or the fortifications it destroyed. But some visitors stop. Some read the placard carefully, perhaps noticing the dates, February to August 1945, and understanding that this weapon existed for just 6 months of combat. Some are veterans who recognize the M1 Garand's profile and wonder about the modification. Some are historians who know the statistics: 68,450 launchers, 286,000 grenades, thousands of bunkers destroyed, thousands of American lives saved by a weapon most people have never heard of. The Japanese veterans have a different perspective. In 2012, a Japanese military historian published a book about Pacific fortification warfare. The chapter on Iwo Jima includes interviews with surviving Japanese soldiers. One veteran, Takashi Miyamoto, described seeing the M7 system for the first time. We heard the explosion and felt the ground shake. When we looked outside, the bunker that had been firing for hours was silent. Smoke was coming from the firing slit. We realized then that American infantry could destroy our positions. Everything we had built meant nothing anymore. The M7 rifle grenade launcher, the Fortress Killer, proved that desperation and innovation could combine to create capabilities that conventional procurement never would have delivered in time. It proved that sometimes the best solution isn't the perfect solution, just the solution that works when you need it most. The Marines who carried the M7 launcher into combat didn't think of themselves as heroes using revolutionary technology. They thought of themselves as men trying to survive, trying to complete their mission, trying to protect the Marines beside them. The launcher was just a tool, heavy, temperamental, sometimes dangerous, but a tool that let them fight fortifications that had killed thousands of their brothers. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss these stories of innovation and sacrifice. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and if you had family who served in the Pacific, tell me about them. Their stories matter. Their sacrifices matter. The M7 grenade launcher existed for 6 months of combat. But in those 6 months, it changed the mathematics of island warfare and saved thousands of American lives. That's worth remembering. That's worth honoring. These men carried weights we can't imagine, fought battles we'll never face, and created solutions when none existed. The least we can do is remember their stories.